In this episode, Golden and I discuss Peacemaker Season 1. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 162. I'm your host, Orrin Merton. Today is President's Day in the USA, which is a fitting day to talk about Peacemaker, who is a B or C level superhero who considers himself ultra-patriotic and always fighting for peace, hence the name. The entire 8-episode season is streaming on HBO Max, and that means it's time for us to discuss it. We're starting out spoiler-free, and then we'll get into spoilers, so be warned. And let's get started. I am here with Golden to talk about Peacemaker, a show that I like to call Pacemaker, but is really Peacemaker.
Yeah, it's entertaining each week when you'd go to say you want to watch it, and you'd say, well, do you want to watch Pacemaker now?
Yeah, I'll admit to flubbing the name a lot. But it is the show, the 8-episode show on HBO Max called Peacemaker, which is the further adventures of the character Peacemaker, who we are introduced to in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, the movie that came out last year.
And what's interesting, at least for me, is that I really had no interest in exploring this character further. At least I didn't think I did.
Yeah, nobody, I mean, I should say nobody, that's not fair. There's probably a few people out there who were reading comics in the 70s and 80s and thought that Peacemaker was an interesting character. But the vast majority of people had no idea who Peacemaker was before the movie The Suicide Squad. And while John Cena was absolutely fine in the part and gave it, vibrance and everything else, you didn't walk away from The Suicide Squad thinking, wow, I really want an 8-episode series on this character.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's definitely the case.
But staying spoiler-free, I think it's safe to say that what James Gunn did is he managed to sort of take the genre of costumed people doing superheroic things. Technically Peacemaker is a costumed superhero, but Peacemaker has
and he wants to wear his costume all the time because that's his uniform.
Right, that is his uniform. But he isn't super powered. He doesn't have any super anything. He does have helmets that have some tech to them, but otherwise that's it. And he takes, James Gunn, who wrote every episode, takes this guy who kind of wants to do the right thing, but is a really damaged individual. And he gives us this incredibly deep human story.
It's a very narrow field in terms of what he sees as his goal in order to keep peace. And during the series, I think that's able to broaden and he's able to grow so much more and develop a little bit more morality, shall we say? Or how would you phrase it?
I don't think that's a bad way to phrase it. I think that for the longest time, he kind of was letting other people in his life, the people who kind of aimed him to do the thinking for him. And I think that by the end of this series, he has kind of he's doing his own thinking.
So what you're saying is he was a torpedo and people were aiming him at things.
Yeah.
And by the end, maybe he started...
Right, he's aiming the torpedo at other things. That will make more sense in the spoilerific section. But yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I think that it's just James Gunn points a mirror at society. And he's said in interviews that he wanted to explore more of our society than just sort of space and adventure with this. And I think he does. I think there is a tragic father-son story here. There is a lot of questioning of the various organizations in our world and government and our society and what role they have to play and what role they should play.
What we take lightly and what we don't take
right.
We don't take serious enough. And it was, I think a lot of people question that he opened with a musical number. And you find out towards the very end, and there's someone on YouTube that went down and broke it down, just how significant that musical number is to the development of these episodes.
Absolutely. And James Gunn has said in an interview that that was in the script. It wasn't something that was thought about later. Well, what kind of titles do we need? He wrote the script with that musical number opening it. And it was kind of his way of, even from episode 1, showing people this series is not going to be what you think it is. That whatever you're expecting, this isn't it. And I think it does because, there's always these cold opens that are very serious or that move the story even if there's humor. And then there's this dance number.
But it's a dance number, but everyone's taking it very seriously.
Right. It's not a light dance number. It's one of those sort of interpretive dances where every movement has a meaning.
And it's the sequence of it, and then later on when you go back to explore how he's telling what's happening through this season in that one opening is really remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, he had this vision, and he said, this is what I'm going to do. He did it. He just passed the scripts along, and it seemed from things that we've watched, with regards to this, that DC was like, okay, well, what do you want a jetliner? You want to go on Air Force One? Whatever you want, we'll help to see that happens because they completely trusted him.
Yeah.
And I think that they were rewarded
with the number 1 streaming show in the U.S. right now.
And I don't think that they expected that to happen.
No, I don't think they did either, but I think they're incredibly happy. I mean, obviously, you knew from the Suicide Squad, to hear James Gunn's story, that as he was wrapping up the Suicide Squad, he literally got a call from the executives saying, Warner Brothers owns HBO Max, etc., and he literally got a call saying, hey, would you like to do a TV series? And they just opened up all the books to him. Just tell us what you want to do, and you have it.
Not only that, but one of the things I also really liked about this is that James Gunn has 1 foot in Marvel, 1 foot in DC.
Right.
And it's not exclusive. The Marvel people were able to work with him to help something with DC. DC was able to help work with something with Marvel.
Yeah.
So that filming could take place, or screen tests could be done, or crews could kind of, be borrowed. And for me, that's what the industry should be about.
Right.
It shouldn't be a fight between DC and Marvel.
I think it really only is if you're an accountant. I think the accountants for the various companies are the ones who sort of are looking at look at the world in terms of limited box office grosses, and they want the higher chunk of it. But I think to the creatives involved, it really is. They realize that, as the saying goes, a rising tide raises all boats. That if good entertainment, if good shows, if good movies are made in this genre, that means more people will go see these kinds of movies. More people will go watch these kinds of shows. And so they're rooting for each other because they know that if Wonder Woman is great, it means more people will go see Captain Marvel, even if it's the other studio, etc.
And I love the casting.
Yeah, the casting.
The casting was really good, and I remember reading early on that Freddie Stroma came in to replace someone else, and I can't imagine anyone with that role.
Right.
He is just absolutely perfect.
Absolutely, and to tell the whole story, Freddie Stroma did not come in early on. They had filmed over half the series before James Gunn and the original Vigilante actor parted ways. So they refilmed a lot.
And I don't know how it was with the other actor, but I think that Peacemaker was better off with Freddie Stroma.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the casting was brilliant. John Cena really gets to... Everybody has seen him as a great physical actor. He's a huge guy. He's got a unique figure.
But apparently Alan Tudyk can still stand in for him during the dance numbers.
Alan Tudyk is himself a pretty cut guy. But yeah, he's got everybody knows he can do the physical parts. He's done a lot of physical parts. But he really got to stretch his emotional acting muscles in this series. And it shows you that he's a real actor, that this isn't just a wrestler who can do action scenes.
Yeah, just in case you're not already clear on it, hands down, if you enjoy any sort of action-adventure show and you don't want just the fluffy show, Peacemaker is incredibly good.
Yeah, it is. I should also say that you may not want your young kids to watch it. The language is incredibly...
the language and content is mature.
Yeah, the language is quite mature. The content's fairly mature. It's not as gory.
So reason is on HBO Max.
Right. It's not as gory as the Suicide Squad, but it's the same sensibility. So there are parts of it that are the CGI blood flows like water. So that is something to consider. But this is really a highlight, is my opinion.
And I like how in terms of the character names, James Gunn doesn't feel like he has to stretch. You just have, in a couple episodes, dickhead, terrified man, racist thug, skinhead girl, white hood wanker. I mean, exactly what they are. We don't need to give them names. We can have this generic. And just also the fact that it is very reflective of some issues that we are still having in society today that people tend to just look over.
Yeah.
They don't actually want to see it.
Yeah, it's poignant while also being hilarious at times. So James Gunn is a great writer. He's at the well, I can't really say the height of his powers because we don't know how high his powers go, but he's firing on all cylinders. This
is very slight spoiler. I don't think it's really going to ruin it for anyone. But when we're talking about like names of characters, at one point John Cena's character Peacemaker is in a classroom with kids, and he basically just calls this girl Alfred E. Newman because she looks kind of like Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine.
Right.
And someone online had posted that, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that to that girl. And the father actually responded saying, oh, she loved it. She had such a great time.
Yeah.
Because it's in fun with that. And
if you love Mad Magazine. But yeah, that was also where I remembered, I'd heard this a very long time ago, but completely forgotten that, for those of you who didn't know, DC Comics and Mad Magazine are both owned by the same parent company. So, hey, they can make those jokes without worrying about licensing and all the rest. So, ending the spoiler-free section, if you like shows with mature content and you like sort of superhero-style stories that go significantly
action,
deeper...
adventure, character development, it really does have it all.
Oh, one thing also we should mention, if you are a fan of 80s heavy metal, you are going to absolutely love this show because James Gunn always puts pop music in his projects, and Peacemaker loves 80s hair metal. He pulls a lot of deep cuts from those 80s metal bands, so it's not just the pop hits. And I will tell you that in one episode, you get to realize that John Cena plays a pretty good piano. That's all I'll say. All right, so getting into the spoilerific section.
So the cast is incredibly good.
Yeah.
I mean, you have basically, we were talking about the fact that some of the actors and actresses, and there's, is this really content? Is this really cinematic? And all of those. And between Coppola and Scorsese kind of bashing any of the Marvel stuff in terms of, and also therefore the DC stuff, that there's no substance
by
to
association.
That it's the same, by association. But it's like the same thing that they're doing over and over again, and it's not.
Right. This is unique. This is not something you can point at and say, Marvel did this. No, they didn't.
You have Peacemaker with this trauma that's so ingrained because he blames himself for killing his brother.
Right. When in fact it was his father who basically set up the situation just for money.
Yeah, and his father blames him.
And to probably toughen up his kids or whatever.
Yeah, and it's really sad because he wants to still see his father as redemption, that his father can be a good guy, that his father, gave him all of these skills and things, and he trained him so that he could be Peacemaker. But
whereas his father is literally a KKK Grand Dragon in a mech suit.
Yeah, and the people around him are trying to tell him, don't waste your time. He's not worth it. He's a bad man, and he wants to believe that his father's better.
I think a part of it is also because he doesn't want to believe. He listened to his father. He says that at the end. His father, he'd listened to his father for all these years. And if his father was as bad as, he is, then that meant he was listening to a horrible, horrible person all of those years. And that's a lot too.
And even after those people that are in our lives that have that negative influence, some positive, but, a lot of negative influence, even when they've passed on or they're no longer around, we still carry it with us. It is very difficult to let that go.
Yeah.
So even though his father is dead at the end, his father is sitting there right next to him.
Right, because his father's always going to be in his head, even if he's not physically around.
It's just, how do you then deal with that?
And I think James Gunn is really good at...
It should be very interesting if there's an implicitly pretentious trauma with this.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. I think James Gunn does a great job of dealing with trauma, dealing with PTSD, dealing with all of these real human issues. So yeah, there's an adventure story. They have to basically stop an alien invasion. That's your superhero adventure, right? That's your superhero adventure story. But the real story is these human beings trying to deal with their own trauma and coming together.
Or is it the human beings are destroying the earth and the butterflies want to save it for them?
Right. It's an interesting question.
I mean,
James Gunn has said he doesn't like villains that are just villains. We've all heard the saying, villains are the heroes of their own story, but he also likes to think of villains as just characters who are doing things another way. So the villains are completely authoritarian. I mean, they've said, we're going to make decisions for the human race.
In some ways, Peacemaker starts out as the villain.
Yeah.
He really does. I mean, that's why he's under Amanda Waller anyway.
Right, he's in jail. He's a murderer.
But where does he end up?
Right.
Because that paradigm shifts for him. So now he can actually start to see himself as a hero.
And that is so important to him, to his self-image, to who he wants to be.
He wants to be the hero.
Yeah, and I think James Gunn is really good at that, at bringing the zany, bringing the adventure, bringing the action, bringing the larger-than-life, but also keeping it grounded in a human story between all the characters. And I think that I should also mention the fact that though Adrian Chase, a.k.a. the Vigilante, never comes out and says, I am autistic, it's pretty clear that his emotional disconnection is pretty much a spectrum thing. And yet, as sort of unable, in a sense, to deal with situations on the level at which other people can, he is incredibly competent, and he does the right thing because intellectually he knows what it is, even if emotionally he doesn't feel it and has no connection to it. He does still know what is right and what is wrong. And I thought that James Gunn portrayed him in a both hilarious and ultimately sensitive way.
I was absolutely impressed, and at one point watching the show, I know that you will sometimes skip intros. And I don't think we skipped that intro dance scene once because there's just something about it.
It was just very engaging. Absolutely.
I think that, like I said before, all of the cast was incredibly, it kept a really good pace through it. It made a really good pace. Get it? Peacemaker. So yeah, I mean, I don't really think that we need to do any big spoilers or anything because it was a really fun show.
It was a really fun show.
Also heart-wrenching at point.
Sure.
Sometimes.
Yeah, so if this sounds even vaguely interesting to you and you don't mind, language and gore, then this is going to be a really outstanding series that you will enjoy. I don't really pay attention to or know much about awards. I've heard that people online saying that this is an award style of show, but take that as you will. The bottom line is it's incredibly good in every way.
And I think everyone had fun. It really felt like, I think you can tell sometimes with the chemistry of the actors and actresses in a show how they actually were working together. And I think it was probably incredibly good, just a good company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/162. If you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.